did introduce you, and I said you have a couple of minutes while you set up your PowerPoint.
Sure.
You now have 40 minutes.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here, taking part in this debate. I want to thank Dr. Nathan Novus and Dr. Ray Green and others who made this possible. Is there an echo? I'm getting a ornament bit here. I am a medical journalist who for more than 9 years served as an associate editor at the Journal of the American Medical Association, which gave me a unique position as a journalist, an investigative reporter to observe medicine at its best and at its worst. I understand a lot of what's wrong with the American medical system and also with medical research. But I don't agree with Dr. Greek's arguments that because the water is a little murky, we need to throw out the baby with the bathwater. He argues that because animal experiments don't always yield reliable results, animal research must therefore be halted. Dr. Greek's views serve the animal liberationists who support him. I don't believe they serve any human being who is prone to disease, and that's each and every one of us. I came to Amherst from Chicago a little over a year ago to head a new division of the Center for Inquiry called the Commission for Scientific Medicine and Mental Health. The commission was established to defend science-based medicine and mental health practices against the attacks of medical quacks and other opponents of evidence-based healthcare. We sponsored 2 peer-review journals, the Scientific Review of Alternative Medicine and the Scientific Review of Mental Health Practice. So why am I here defending the use of animals in biomedical research? I'm here because animal experiments are an essential tool for biomedical studies. This vital tool is now being attacked not by researchers, but by spokespersons for animal liberation groups such as PETA, that's People for Ethical Treatment of Animals, and its front group, Physician Committee for Responsible Medicine, which is neither a committee of physicians nor an advocate for responsible medicine. Today, science is coming under increasing attacks from a wide variety of groups that have agendas inconsistent with free inquiry and reason, which are what the Center for Inquiry and the Commission for Scientific Medicine and Mental Health were established to defend. However, today I am speaking only for myself. I am not speaking for either CFI or the Commission, because the Commission has not yet adopted a position on these issues. I therefore speak only for myself. While I reported on the animal liberation movement 10 to 15 years ago for the Journal of the American Medical Association, I haven't kept up with the issues or on the escalating acts of violence against scientists who use animals in their research. Less than 2 months ago, Dr. Novus gave a talk at CFI, which brought me back to this subject and to agreeing to this debate. I've been working on it in my spare time, and I regret that the talk is only half finished. So you'll have to forgive me later on when I have to wing it. What motivated me most were the attacks on the March of Dimes that Dr. Novus, Dr. Greek, and other animal rights extremists are conducting, such as they do in the publication like this magazine, published by the PETA-sponsored Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, or PCRM. A few weeks ago, on April 12th, I and many others throughout this world celebrated the 50th anniversary of the conquest of polio. On that day in 1955, March of Dimes funded researchers announced the results of the Salk polio vaccine field trial. The whole world rejoiced when it was announced that the vaccine was safe, effective, and potent. That was just 17 years after President Franklin Roosevelt established the National Foundation for Infantile Paralysis in 1938, which became known as the March of Dimes, following a comment by comedian actor Eddie Cantor, who told the radio audience that he wanted to see a march of dimes right into the White House to fight this terrible disease. And march those dimes did. It took the contribution of more than 100 million Americans to do it. But in less than 20 years, March of Dimes-led researchers developed 2 vaccines, not just one, to conquer polio and wipe it from our planet. But they had to do it with the help of tens of thousands of monkeys and other animals, which is why animal rights extremists now despise the March of Dimes. But let's look at what the sacrifice accomplished. 5 years ago, I don't have the slides. 5 years ago, only a dozen or so countries were reporting cases of polio. And last year, that number shrunk. I had slides, but apparently they're not here. There's only a handful of countries now where polio is isolated. India, some parts of Africa. Thanks to international efforts to eliminate the remaining pockets of polio with the polio vaccines, this dreadful disease is close to being completely eradicated the way smallpox was. I would say there's probably only one other person here that remembers what the terror of polio was like. Many of you probably don't know anybody who was crippled with polio. Few of you can ever imagine the terror that this disease caused. One of the great polio epidemics struck New York City in 1916, which caused thousands of people to flee the city in a panic, only to be met by armed citizens in the neighboring communities who threatened to shoot them if they didn't turn around and go back. The epidemic of 1952 was far worse. It crippled and killed more than 58,000 children and adults in the United States alone. And the following year, in the fall of 1953, the March of Dimes began the largest clinical trial ever conducted. More than 1 million school children were vaccinated with the killed virus vaccine that Dr. Jonas Salk developed by using 17,000 monkeys to establish that that vaccine could produce immunity to every strain of polio virus in the world. Another 3 million children served as controls. I was one of those children. I was in the 2nd grade, and I remember seeing the volunteer children getting vaccinated in my school's gym. And I remember the news, a little over a year later, announcing the spectacular success of that vaccine. It's hard to describe the terrible fear that returned every summer, the season when polio was by far the worst. Parents wouldn't allow their children to go to swim in public pools. Like my parents, many wouldn't let their children go to movie theaters. I was 10 years old before I was first allowed to go to a movie theater. And I remember that day. I saw James Cagney in A Man of 1,000 Faces, in case you were wondering. Excellent film. But it's not just the disinformation campaign that animal rights extremists are conducting about the history of the polio vaccine. In fact, we saw a slide here saying that the polio vaccine was delayed because of animal research. That's categorically not true. I am also dismayed by their attacks on the Foundation's current efforts to defeat birth defects. After conquering polio, the March of Dimes rolled up its sleeves even higher than it did before and turned its oppressive fundraising and research granting machinery to the goal of conquering birth defects, all several thousand of them. I know how impressive this machinery is because after graduating from Columbia University Graduate School of Journalism, I went to work for the March of Dimes as a science writer. It was my job to study the research funded by the Foundation and explain it to the news media and to the public. I worked for the Foundation for 3.5 years and came away with the utmost respect and appreciation for what this remarkable charity has done and continues to do. So when I learned about the campaign of disinformation that animal rights extremists are conducting against the March of Dimes, I volunteered to speak out here. Because the March of Dimes refuses to be blackmailed into discontinuing the funding of animal research, animal rights extremists are trying to persuade groups to stop donating to the Foundation. Yes. Many of you haven't seen, and you may not even know what it is. But back half a century ago, Hospital wards were filled with iron lungs that did the breathing for children and young adults. Today, they're relics of museums. This is a website that Peter has up, March of Crimes website, where it vilifies the March of Dimes and says what, well, I don't have a copy of a letter that Dr. Nathan Nogus, identifying himself as a representative of Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, sent to the executive board of the Spanish and Latino Students Association of the University of Rochester in an attempt to stop them from raising money for the March of Dimes Birth Defects Foundation. Quote, "You might not know that the March of Dimes sponsors exceedingly cruel research that in no way helps children," unquote, he wrote. Nathan referred the Spanish and Latino Students Association to a website run by Peter called the March of Crimes. Peter and its pseudoscientific front group, PCRM, are also attacking other leading charities that refuse to stop funding animal research, such as the American Cancer Society and the American Heart Association, the Arthritis Foundation, and others. For example, here's a sidebar published. Oh, by the way, this is a little handwritten note from the March of Dimes campaign coordinator of Peter that was left on the front stoop of the president of the March of Dimes. It's a little intimidation tactic. It mentions how she visited all the neighbors and told them what terrible things the president and the March of Dimes are doing. Well, you'll find out how intimidating this is when I talk a little more about Peter's operations and the people they support. This is a sidebar that appeared in that Good Medicine magazine of PCRM. It encourages people, instead of donating to the Arthritis Foundation, which conducts great research in the better treatments and cure of arthritis. Instead, it says to donate to the Arthritis Research Institute of America and the Arthritis Trust of America. So let's take a look. Here's the Arthritis Research Institute of America. First, let me tell you, the Massachusetts, do I have that? Yeah, here's the Massachusetts chapter of the Arthritis Foundation. It has a 3-star rating. 86% of its donations people give goes to funding programs. Now let's take a look at the charity that PCRM is recommending. 35.3% goes to programs, the rest goes to salaries, expenses, and fundraising efforts. Let's take a look at the other organization that they're telling people to donate to. The Arthritis Trust of America. This is a fringe group that claims to have already found the cure for arthritis and other autoimmune diseases. Its websites state, quote, "We tell folks how to get well from so-called incurable autoimmune or collagen tissue diseases, such as the rheumatoid diseases and related diseases, by means of physician referral, publications, and when money is available, refund alternative, complementary, holistic medical research." Of course, if this foundation does have the cure for so-called incurable arthritis, why would they spend any money on research, alternative or otherwise, when they should be using it to provide the cure to sufferers? So is this responsible medicine that Peter and PCRM is offering? I'd like to tell you more about Peter and the so-called Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. But I first want to tell you about some of the March of Dimes supported research involving animal studies that have already saved hundreds of thousands of children from death and crippling birth defects. Respiratory distress syndrome, also known as hyaline membrane disease, was a great crippler and killer of low birth weight babies. Babies born before their lungs are mature enough to function normally would often develop this mysterious, devastating disease that would cause their tiny lung sacs to collapse, leading to suffocation. March of Dimes supported research with animals led to the development of a very effective treatment that has cut the death rate from respiratory distress syndrome in half. It also greatly reduced the incidence of lasting disabilities among survivors of respiratory distress syndrome. The treatment involves coating the baby's lungs with either an animal-derived or artificial surfactant until the lungs mature enough to produce their own natural surfactant. This research was conducted on animals first, because you can't do this with human babies. Another great killer of newborns was a birth defect called persistent pulmonary hypertension. This defect causes increased blood pressure in the blood vessels of the baby's lungs and prevent the lung sacs from expanding and contracting normally. A major advance in the treatment of babies with this defect came about through Marchedine-supported animal research. The treatment involves a tiny amount of nitrous oxide, a powerful but toxic gas that causes constricted blood vessels to relax. The safe and effective amount of this gas for babies was worked out using animal models for the disease. The treatment has significantly reduced the total of injury and death from this birth defect. Patent ductus arteriosus is the most common birth defect involving the baby's heart. Before birth, there is an opening between the fetus's aorta and the pulmonary artery to circumvent the lungs, which of course aren't used in utero. In some babies, that opening doesn't close after birth, which prevents the baby from getting sufficient oxygen through his or her lungs. Severe cases had to be treated with risky and traumatizing surgery. Thanks to Marchedine's funded research involving animal models, the causes of the birth defect were worked out and effective drug treatments were developed to safely close that opening. Animal research showed how prostaglandins keep this opening from closing after birth. And animal research showed that prostaglandin inhibitors could safely close it. So now drugs like indomethacin are being used to treat babies with patent ductus arteriosus instead of hazardous heart surgery. That same research led to a successful treatment for another common birth defect of the heart that once killed many newborn babies. Hypoplastic left heart syndrome results when the left side of a baby's heart is too weak to pump enough blood through the heart to keep the baby alive. By treating those babies with a prostaglandin, doctors now are keeping the baby's ductus arteriosus open instead of closing it. Creating a patent ductus arteriosus in these babies allows the right side of the baby's heart to pump blood through the lungs to keep it alive long enough for doctors to surgically repair its malformed heart. These are just a few of the many advances brought about by animal research, the research that animal rights extremists insist do not help babies. Let me